Hey there, it's Rod Yates here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned along the way. And my special guest today is Soundgarden guitarist Kim Thayil. So 2021 marks the 30th anniversary of Soundgarden's landmark album Badmotorfinger. When they released that record, the band were on the verge of exploding, with Seattle quickly becoming the epicenter of the music universe, with Pearl Jam releasing 10 and of course Nirvana releasing Nevermind that same year. But as Kim explains in this interview, from the day in 1984 when he formed Soundgarden with bassist Hiro Yamamoto and vocalist Chris Cornell, who was also playing drums at that point, they were never willing to bend towards the mainstream. Instead, they'd make the market come to them. And come it did. We talk about the band's formation and rise in this interview, what life was like in Seattle as the scene was exploding, the tragic moment Kim heard of Kurt Cobain's passing, and Kim's memories of Chris Cornell, who we lost in 2017. But we started by going all the way back to the beginning of Kim's life and how it came to be that his parents had moved from India to America.
I think they're students. So they went to the University of Washington. My dad was an engineering student and ultimately an engineer. And my mom she majored in English and music, became a teacher, English teacher.
And because you went to the University of Washington as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to the University of Illinois first.
Right.
In Chicago. Then I dropped out for a bit and I moved to Seattle just to get away from Chicago. I love Chicago, but it's, I was 21, so 21-year-olds should want to leave home. They shouldn't want to stay in their mom's basement. So Hiro and I moved out to Seattle, and after a year or so, I went back to school. And then while I was in school, Soundgarden formed.
That's right. Well, I mean, just again, quickly to talk to you about your parents. Did your Indian heritage, did that play a big role in your upbringing?
My parents are pretty Western. Their primary and I think their only language is English, because India, of course, is part of the British Crown for centuries. So they're both Protestant English speakers. I think my mom spoke a little bit of French, and they probably know Indian idioms, I'm going to guess. So my parents happened to be somewhat Western, which I'm sure facilitated movement or travel within the Crown, I guess you'd say, sure. Right? Or the U.S. not being part of that, I'm sure being English-speaking Christians made it easier for them to immigrate than if they were Hindi-speaking Buddhist or drawing a blank on the other language.
That's okay. That's all right. So
Urdu, Marathi, Farsi.
Right, but it was quite a Western upbringing. It was a very American upbringing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are certain attributes of it, like Indian cuisine. Various cuisines they like to eat. It's part of their diet. Their incense, some raga music. The one thing that I think they both liked that had influence on me was they listened to Pete Seeger, and Christian folk and pop music that was more along the socially and politically progressive side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Peter, Paul, Mary, something like that.
Did that have a big imprint on you?
Probably. I mean, both my parents liked singing. Would sing around the home. My mom, played piano, but my parents couldn't afford a piano until we were until I was a teenager, I think. So yeah, they would sing. They would sing at church, and they'd sing at home. But for the record, I did not like going to church. I actually broke down in tears after a Sunday school when I was like 6 or 7, and pleaded with my parents to not make me go anymore. And they said, "Okay, you don't have to go anymore." So it's great.
Why did you have that reaction?
It just sucked. It was just, it just seemed, there was something about it that seemed dumb. It wasn't like the cartoons I liked. It wasn't like the books I read. It's like, these stories are weird. My parents liked that. So, that's how I grow up with that particular value. I just don't want to endure Sunday school.
Yeah, fair enough. Am I right in thinking that you were about 12 when you actually started writing song lyrics?
Yeah, lyrics and melodies, but I didn't know how to play an instrument yet. So I just had songs in my head. But my best friend played piano, so I'd write out these lyrics and I'd hum them or sing them, and he wanted to be able to try to write the music for it. And at some point, then we got in some argument. He accidentally erased some cassette of something that was very special to us, and it bummed me out. And he thought it was funny that he had erased it by this. He was laughing at his stupid actions, and I was angry at his stupid actions. So I discarded the lyrics, and we never finished writing them. But we did end up maintaining our friendship to this day.
Okay. But isn't that interesting, though, that even at the age of 12, music was special to you and songs were special to you? Why do you think that was?
I just love the Beatles. And there were certain songs that just kind of just connected with me almost instantaneously. You could see my taste as a young boy extending over to what I would do with Soundgarden. I remember I loved the Beatles, but I just couldn't stand that song, Hey Jude. I remember hearing it. It's like, it just seemed so slow and took forever. But I absolutely loved Day Tripper. My parents remember me, even at a young age, when they remember me having emotive responses to music that they thought was strange. Like there were certain songs that would make me start crying, like if it came on the radio. And there are certain songs that I would just love and make me happy. And I remember them thinking it was strange that there are particular songs that make me sad. I think there might have been like some Herb Alpert instrumentals or a song like Winchester Cathedral, which is kind of a silly, bouncy, skippy song. There's something about the melody which is kind of minor, and it made me sad. And my parents thought, this is look at a weird little kid. I have no idea what the lyrics are, but I'd be like, So I hear songs like the Beatles and the Monkees on the radio, and Paul Revere and the Raiders, and I just love them. But some of the songs that haunted me were ones that kind of scared me. Like there were lyrical lines that I didn't understand or were spooky to a little kid. Like, remember Incense and Peppermint, the song by the Strawberry Alarm Clock?
I do not actually know.
It was a hit in the 60s, kind of psychedelic, kind of wild, but some of the lyrics included the word lunatic and beatnik, and those are both scary to a 6 or 7-year-old, at that time. It's like, beatniks, what are lunatics, oh my God. But I love the music, but it's kind of like watching a horror movie, or something. It's like just you want to close your eyes, but you love this movie and you want to see the monster, but you're hiding your eyes. So I just love the Beatles. It was so easy. Everyone kind of loved the Beatles, but I didn't like Hey Jude. I loved Day Tripper. I love Ticket to Ride. I loved songs of the Monkees. Paul Revere and the Raiders also had these cool songs like Hungry and Kicks, and there was a certain kind of song I liked even when I was like 6 or 7.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you've got that love of the Beatles, but you also have this love of darker kind of things that perhaps are a little bit scary to you as a kid. And jumping forward decades now into Soundgarden, and it's almost that amalgam of exactly that little slightly weird element, slightly dark element, but slightly beautiful Beatlesy element. It's all in there.
I liked psychedelic. I liked the guitar riffs, the kind of guitar riffs you'd hear on Dr. Robert or Ticket to Ride or Day Tripper. I remember first time I heard, I think I was 11 years old, and there was a kid who'd been held back a couple of years who was 13. And on one of those days where kids are allowed to bring in things and share, I probably bring in a record, probably a Ringo Starr single like Back Off Boogaloo or something. And maybe Three Dog Night, Joy to the World. And this kid is 2 years older and much taller, who's been held back for 2 years, brings in Paranoid by Black Sabbath. And there's a song they call it Iron Man. Well, I love comic books. I've got a bunch of comic books. I want to hear this song. And it did exactly what you just said. I love the riff. The riffs are so cool and heavy, but it was so dark and scary. It's like, what is this? This doesn't sound like the pop songs that have keyboards and upbeat guitar things. It's a little bit darker and creepier. but I was compelled to listen to that song over and over again while frightened at the same time.
And so when you get a guitar at 15, is all this music and influences that have been swirling around your head, is that what you gravitate towards in terms of what you're learning on the guitar?
I want to play, cool rock songs that have a positive, happy, smiley, boyfriend, girlfriend, sunny day type song.
Really?
And everything yeah, but that's what I like, and that's what I want to do. So, you learn how to play Louie Louie, or I'm the kind of guy who would have loved that song by the Romantics. That's what I like about you. And I did, it was probably my late teens when that came out, or early 20s or whatever it was, college. But then I go and pick up the guitar and I just start playing things that are a little bit darker than that. And I want to kind of do that, but there's this other thing that happens. And then gradually your tastes change, and I started incorporating the weird, quirky element and the dark element. And I started listening to, bands like Chrome and Perubu and,
Sure,
of course, Devo. Sabbath goes in and out of my life. It's like, stop listening to them because they're not punk rock, and then you start listening to them because they're cool.
yeah. So when you think, all right, so you've got a guitar, you start forming bands. I believe Bozo and the Pinheads was your first band, and then that.
Oh, that was in Chicago, yeah.
Oh, that was in Chicago. I beg your pardon.
How do you know all this? How do you do all this?
Just research. So no, exactly. So you're in Chicago. You haven't moved to Seattle yet, but you got Bozo and the Pinheads, and then that moves into Identity Crisis, and then that Identity Crisis splits, and you're friends with Hiro Yamamoto at this point. You've met him at school. And the two of you with Bruce Pavitt, I understand, who would go on to form Sub Pop, you moved to Seattle.
Well, not with Bruce. Bruce was a year older than me. He moved ahead. He was in a different college in Illinois. Then he went to college at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And Hiro and I, that band Identity Crisis breaks up, and Bruce Pavitt's younger brother John was in that band.
Right.
He's still one of my close friends. We stay in touch. But then that band breaks up, and John ends up playing in a band with Hiro. And that band eventually breaks up, and Hiro and I are in a situation where our girlfriends have gone off to college or left us or whatever, and our bands are broken up. It's like, we drive right into Seattle, and we end up getting a place in what's called the University District, where the University of Washington is located. So we work and pay the rent, get jobs, finance any musical endeavors. We make friends in Seattle. Another close friend of ours, moves out from Chicago. We all live in a house together. And eventually I go to the University of Washington.
Right. And about 1982, 1983, you meet Chris Cornell for the first time.
Yep.
What are your memories of that first encounter?
A roommate of mine, who was also from that hometown in Chicago, who went to the same high school, same progressive school. He's a guitarist. He's a great guitarist, but I don't like his taste in music. It's a little bit more conventional bar rock, Stones, Hendrix, Otis Redding. I like all those bands, are incredibly talented. I love Hendrix, but, I'm listening to, Dead Kennedys and Flipper and Devo and the B-52s and Black Flag. It's just my interests are all over the place. I'm working at a college radio station. I'm getting turned on to new indie bands and punk bands. And my roommate is somewhere between the Allman Brothers, Grateful Dead, and doing Doors songs and Stone songs. So he forms a band, and he gets Hiro to play bass in the band, and another friend of ours plays drums. And he comes home one day and goes, I met this guy who wants to sing. And I want to introduce you to this guy, Chris. Chris, this is Kim. Kim, this is Chris. I was like, all right. But my context was, I hope this guy's a good singer, but he's going to be singing some dumb stuff. And he's got to go, sing this bar rock. And that's what I thought. I thought, okay, it's my buddy's bar rock band. I don't care. I imagine Hiro's going to get sick of that pretty quick. He did. Hiro got sick of it. Hiro quit the band. And then my roommate said, will you play bass? I was like, yes, I'll learn how to play your Doors and Stones and Hendrix songs on bass. So I do. So now I'm playing in this band with Chris singing and my roommate, high school friend playing guitar. And it's fun kind of hanging out with them. I like them as people, but this is not what I want to be doing in musically,
And did Chris have the voice even back then?
Yeah, he had the voice, but I mean, it was conventional sounding. It got stronger, but he definitely knew he could definitely sing. I mean, definitely see that there's talent there, but there are two contexts with which I failed to appreciate it. One was the material, which was irritating to me. It just like, God, this reminds me of every, I don't know, FM radio in the 70s. There's cool stuff in it, but I'm not there now anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, I love all this stuff, but now I'm listening to something else. And then the other context, which was weird, was the fact that Chris is primarily a drummer, but he liked singing. He wanted to sing, but he hadn't developed that full range and the spectrum that would have been crazy to hear. But he knew how to sing conventional bar songs. Like, okay, great. There are a lot of people who can do that, and I just didn't care.
Well, I guess when that band not so much morphs into Soundgarden, but you and Hero and
It did
Chris,
not morph, and that narrative kind of came from the guy who ran that band. The band was called the Shemps.
Yes.
And he got, somehow there are people who try to do thorough research in books, and they somehow got a hold of him, and this weird narrative that Soundgarden morphed into that, or that someone formed Soundgarden. No, the only thing that those two bands have in common was a group of friends who had played together at different times with that particular lineup. But that's going to be the case. I mean, all the musicians we knew were kind of friends of ours, either from the geographically proximal, or people who are working in the same place, or people who went to the same shows. And we were in Seattle, so if Black Flag comes to town, there's going to be 200 people there, and you're probably going to know all of them, So that was that. It's like nobody wanted to keep doing bar rock covers.
Sure.
So Chris and Hero moved in together. Chris playing drums, Hero playing bass, and they would just kind of jam, just a rhythm section. And they would have guitarists come by. They'd try to find guitarists that might play with them to start a band. And they played with a lot of guitarists, and none of them seemed to work. Everything just kept either not clicking or just being more traditional or conventional. And then they said, well, what about Kim? He's actually a good. Chris knew me as a bass player. It's like, Kim's a guitar player, and he likes these kinds of songs and bands, which is kind of like what Hero liked, and it's kind of like what Chris liked. So we're playing with a lot of good guitarists who don't come from the same space, but Kim does. But Kim's got a girlfriend. Kim's in college. Kim's got a job, so he's working and going to school, and then But they invite me down to go jam with them, the rhythm section. And the first day we're there, we write 3 songs that are like nothing I've ever done in a band before, like nothing Chris or Hero have done in a band before. It sounds distinctly unique. And we were laughing, we were giddy with how easy it was and how fun it was. We get together, I think it was a Monday, and then we get together the next day on a Tuesday to jam again, and we write 2 more songs. So we've now written 5 songs. Music, Chris had lyric ideas that he had written down on paper, and he'd say, I have some lyrics that might fit. And he'd go and listen to the tape we just made and say, yeah, they'll fit. So he'll try to play drums and sing, and that's a challenge. But then we record it with all 3 of us playing, and Chris would sing over the instrumental. It's like, and we were just so happy. We're all looking at each other and smiling, and high five. It's like, this is cooler than any band I've been in. These songs are, you could just tell they just fit in a different place, and it was addressing everybody's interests, and contributions. So, and then I didn't come back the next time they asked me to play. It's like, no, I got to work. No, I got a date. No, I got to go to school. And it's like, well, after like a week or 2, Hero's like, didn't you like playing with us? I go, yeah. don't you like the stuff we recorded? Yeah, I just don't have time. I mean, do you want to play with us? So yes, but dude, I got midterms coming up,
So you didn't have that. You weren't particularly career oriented in terms of a rock perspective at that point.
No, I wanted to be a rock star when I was 15. Now, well, how old was I then? We formed 23. I think I might have just turned 23 or 24.
Okay.
And it's like I'm near the end of college. I just have one more quarter to go. It's like my teenage fantasy of being a rock star is way past me. It's like the very reality of having to pay rent, and keep a job and manage a relationship that it's the real world. It's like I want to play music because I have fun with it and I think I'm good at it. I think the guys I'm playing with are good, but I'm just going to have to schedule it.
Right.
So Hero guilts me into coming and just making time to come over at night after I've done everything else. I come over and jam with them, and at some point he insists on a commitment. Are we going to be a band? It's like, I know it's so great, and this the ease with which we're writing together and communicating with each other is just unusual and not like anything else. It's like okay, yes, I commit. We're in a band. What should we call ourselves? Who cares? It took a few months before I came up with the name Soundgarden, and everyone liked it. So it took a while.
So how did that perspective, once you fast forward several years and you record Screaming Life 1987, but then later on with that, obviously you end up getting major label deal with A&M, the first Seattle band to get that sort of exposure.
Well, from that scene.
But how does that perspective that you had on things, in terms of you weren't particularly career oriented as a rock star at 23, and does it give you a different perspective on the success as it starts to come to you, that the fact that you had that mindset going into it?
Yeah, because I was less eager. I wasn't oriented towards being a rock star. I could take it or leave it. I have a college degree now, and perhaps I'm going to go to graduate school. I don't. My eggs aren't in that one basket. I don't have to address our music for a commercial audience. I don't have to think that way. I don't have to think about patronizing a particular radio programming or record label interests. We can do what we do. And I remember us saying this repeatedly. It's like, if we do this long enough, we're going to bend the market toward us, bend them toward us. We don't have to patronize them. We don't have to do what they think's right. We like what we're doing. Let's just keep doing that. If we like it, it'll show. We'll play well. We'll come up with cool songs. We'll enjoy ourselves. We'll have fun. And if we stay together long enough, the audience will build. People will hear it. They'll see that we like what we're doing. We're good at what we're doing, and it'll grow. And that's fine. Who cares? Who knows how big that'll be? Won't worry about that.
When did you get a sense that it was building?
I think when major labels started, well, before that, we started playing shows locally where the promoter would come up and say, you just set the door record or the house record for, you got over 500 people in here. Our capacity is this. And people would leave and we'd let more people in. And it's like, this is the most people we ever had in on a weekday. You should come back and play on the weekend. And then the same thing kept happening. This is the most people we ever had on a Saturday night. So we thought, well, great. We're not, we're growing and we're getting some success, and mostly from people, a lot of friends of ours in the music community. That's what it was. There'd be 500 people there, and half of them were people in bands, and their friends and their girlfriends, and people you work with or people you knew from college. It just kept getting bigger because people would tell their friends or whatever and drag them out.
After the break, Kim talks about the explosion of the Seattle scene, releasing Jesus Christ Pose as the first single off Badmotorfinger, and his memories of Chris Cornell. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Kim Thayil. Hindsight's always easy to say this, but did you sense that, for example, when you were in clubs and Mother Love Bone were in clubs, and Green River, and later into Mookie Blaylock, and they'd go into Pearl Jam, and you've got Tad and Nirvana all playing in this scene, did you sense that there's something special here, or are you just in it?
Yeah, I think when Deep Six came out, I mean, we kind of knew us, Green River, Skinyard, Malfunction. Tad was in a band called H Hour that would play. They moved to Seattle from Boise, Idaho. They play shows with us. And there was definitely a scene. I mean, these were the bands that would open up for, we all liked a lot of the same kind of music. We grew up with some similar music. We liked a lot of the same contemporaries. We'd all end up at the Meat Puppets or Husker Du show, or the Dead Kennedys show, or the DOA or Black Flag show. We'd probably also all go see Jeff Beck, or all go to see Devo. It's Seattle. It's a small place, and everyone has, they shared some interest and taste. So the bands, if our band might open up for Husker Du, and it did. Husker Du played 2 shows. Then the first night, the Melvins opened up for them. The next night, we did. We play shows with the Melvins. Another band that you might want to play with comes to town, and you don't get the gig, but Green River does, and you're going to go there anyways to see Green River and see the band. So a lot of that was happening. But we realized that there's a lot of mutual support, cooperation. And then when Deep Six came out, a lot of that was Chris Hansick, who produced Deep Six, wanted to make a record with Green River, saw us opening for Green River, wanted to make a Soundgarden record, and I thought, well, let's do a split record, like Green River on one side, Soundgarden on the other side. And then in talking to Mark and Jeff Ament from Green River said, there's some other bands that are cool here. You should do a compilation record, which was kind of a big deal with punk rock in the 80s, right? You put out a compilation record, it defines the scene. This is Boston, not LA or something. Here's something from DC, or a bunch of bands. So you buy a record, you get a bunch of bands from DC. So Green River, very altruistically, is thinking, let's get some stuff with the Melvins who haven't put a record out yet, or Malfunction who haven't put a record out. And Mark calls me up because he knows I'm a DJ at the college station. I'm in Soundgarden. What do you think we should do? What do you think of, should we get the Melvins and Malfunction? Oh, definitely. We got to get the U-Men on it. Well, that's 5 bands. Let's get 6 bands, 3 bands on each side. We got 5. Let's just make it. That'll be the easiest way to do things. What would be the 6th band? We came up with Skinyard. We pushed Skinyard. And I think Jack and Dino from there ended up working with Chris Hansick and went to Reciprocal Studios and everything. So that really helped solidify that, was just connecting with all the other bands that liked each other, making a record together. Now we're dealing with artists. There's a guy who'd come to the shows who ended up being a close friend. We got him to do the artwork. And they got Chris Hansick, who's recording it, and he has a label. So things are kind of coming together. But then Bruce Pavitt, who has this magazine called Sub Pop, is giving great reviews to the bands and the record. And he takes his magazine and turns into a cassette magazine. And then he decides he wants to make a vinyl magazine. Well, from the idea of a vinyl magazine was kind of cool. And at some point you had to ask yourself, when does this vinyl magazine stop being a periodical and become a label?
Right. And it's so organic, what you've just described there, and so artist focused. And then you fast forward several years to 1991. You released Badmotorfinger, Pearl Jam released 10, Nirvana released Nevermind. There are major label deals. Seattle is at the epicenter of a new musical movement. That must change everything in terms of going from that very organic beginning to where you are now in this multi-conglomerate MTV world. Was that a big shift for you?
Yeah, I think probably. I think Nirvana's success sort of stunned a lot of people. Not that they weren't deserving of it. Everyone loved Nirvana. They totally deserved it. But it was the magnitude of their success was a bit overwhelming. I remember it really had an effect on the guys at Sub Pop. They were just like, wow, what just happened? Our lives have changed. And the attention that came to the city, the media, the press, MTV, magazines, people started moving here, because that's where their favorite band was from, or bands started moving here because there's a cool label happening, apparently. So culturally, it became this significant thing, at least with that pop culture, rock culture, and the corollary fields of journalism and photography and graphic art and cartoon art, and then Fantagraphics, comic books takes off, and Starbucks goes public with its offering, and it starts franchising around the world. Microsoft becomes the operating system of every laptop, and so people finish college like, I'm going to go get a job out there with Microsoft and go see all my favorite bands play, and there you go. Too many people in Seattle now. Stop drinking all the coffee.
But I think one of you mentioned earlier about Soundgarden's attitude was let's let the mainstream bend toward, or let's let people bend towards us. We'll just do what we do. And I think a great example of that is with Badmotorfinger. You know, you're at this point in your career where the stars are aligning for this to be a big album for you. And the first single you release from that is Jesus Christ Pose, which is with that video clip, which itself is quite, it's confronting's the wrong word, but it's an assault.
Provocative, maybe?
Provocative. It's an assault on the senses in a great way, but that song is not commercial. But you still decided that was going to be the first taste of the record. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I think generally the record company knows, they kind of knew our attitude. It's like, well, we got to show people what is distinct or unique about this group, you know. So you're not going to send the more conventional song. They probably were thinking the big hit might be Outshine, you know. It's got hummable and palatable vocals, so that's got the most pop element or commercial element might be there. But the riff is an odd time signature and it's heavy. So that indicates something unique about this band and maybe about that music scene. But it might be radio friendly. They're not going to lead with that song. They're still introducing us to MTV and radio. And our interest always was, let's release the song that is defining of who or more defining of who we are, or defining of the record, rather than something that might be more commercially successful, but less an indicator of the band. So for instance, with the later record, Super Unknown, we wouldn't want to start with like Black Hole Sun or Fell on Black Days. It's like, well, because Black Hole Sun's a great song, but it doesn't really represent the band or album's typical style. Same with Badmotorfinger. It's like, well, let's start with Jesus Christ Pose then. We don't expect it to be huge, but knock on people's doors and say, hey, here's our new record. You know,
yeah,
you've heard of us. This is what we sound like.
It feels like, at the time, I remember thinking, well, that just makes sense. But looking back now in hindsight, again, I think that was a pretty gutsy move.
I mean, there are other songs we could have done. I mean, Your Room 1,000 Years Wide had been a single on Sub Pop. And this version was perhaps, you know, better sonically. But the song was already out there. A song like Mind Riot might be our most mellow, ballady song from that record. But we never released that as a single. So, yeah, it was Jesus Christ Pose was a fun way to start.
Yeah. And by this point, music is your career. Soundgarden is your career. And again, is that a mind shift? Is that I'm always interested in that point in an artist's career where it stops being a hobby and becomes a career and becomes a job in some ways. You've got gigs.
It might be around then, because in the back of my mind, my significant other, my girlfriend at the time, we'd been together for like 10 years. She was in law school. We were both, you know, both met at college. We were both philosophy majors. She's going to law school, and I'm going to Europe to tour with Louder Than Love or with Badmotorfinger. And at some point in the back of my mind, I'm thinking my trajectory might be academic or professional, but I like this and I'm good at this, but I'm not going to expect this of the rest of my life. And sometime with Badmotorfinger, it started kind of sinking in, like, that thing you wanted to do when you were 16 or 17 or 15, you're doing that now, and this is it. And it started kind of occurring to me that this has always been more of a hobby, more than a hobby to you, because of the obsessive investment in your time you've had with the songs and the material and the recording. You've treated it that way. You're having it's starting to pay off. You're having, I don't mean pay off like financially. I mean, like, whether I was aware of it or not, there was some kind of obsessive attention to detail about the band and things we did that I was involved in, and that also Chris and Hero were involved in, and Matt in different ways, and then ultimately Ben on Badmotorfinger. There was enough commitment and involvement with what we were doing creatively that I guess I just stumbled into that being the thing that occupied my day. I guess this is what I'm doing. I guess I that was so weird. I was still living in an apartment, paying like I couldn't buy a house. I didn't have a car. I was using our old Soundgarden van to drive around in. I don't think I was able to get a house or a car until sometime after Super Unknown. And then it's like, this is what I do for a living.
So Super Unknown comes out several years later in 1994, and obviously it's a huge success. So Soundgarden's on the ascendancy with this point, but you were playing a show in Paris when you discovered that Kurt Cobain had passed away. I believe you were told on stage. Does that seem like a moment, and this is probably not the right phrase, but the party's over? Something changes at that moment?
The party was over when Andy Wood died from Mother Love Bone. We were friends of those guys, all of them. I played music with Greg, their drummer. He's a good friend. Bruce Fairweather, who's in Green River, Mother Love Bone, is one of my best friends for years. Andy was one of Chris's best friends. And when Andy passed away, it just seemed too comic book like. It seemed like this cliche or caricature of what we grew up, learning about rock bands. It's like, oh, Brian Jones, or he passes away, or Sid, someone like Sid Barrett loses his mind, or Keith Moon's gone, or Sid Vicious, or Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. It's like, what's going on? We're different people. This is a different thing. Who scripted this? Why is something happening that seems like a piece of fiction? Mm-hmm. And so that changed things. That was really upsetting. When we lost Andy. Yeah. Then a few years later, you lose, Kurt. And it's like, and in between that, there were other friends and musicians and people from that community who passed away from various things, from disease or drugs or suicide. And when Kurt disappeared, it was Gary, the guitarist for Tad, told me while we were on stage in Paris during a break in the set. He just told me that a body had been found at Kurt's house, and I just felt the blood just drain out of me. That feeling when you get terrible news or it's just, I just feel everything drop, my stomach, the blood. Even though the news story was that a body was found, I knew what the result would be, what the answer was. And yeah, that was just a heavy few days with the guys from Soundgarden and Tad, who are, I know, to be so far away. But that was just too much. Yeah, it was. I think the party's over thing kind of hit a little bit with Andy. There's something about this. Like, are we in a comic book? When that happens, like, no, this is their success was of a magnitude it seemed unreal. Kurt's suicide seemed to be of a narrative that was even less real. It's like this can't be happening. This is everything that you might come to understand about this aspect of life since we were little kids, and this is really happening. It was.
Yeah. Did it create a resentment to, I guess, the circus that had surrounded the scene at that point?
Yeah, I think there'd been some resentment prior to that had built really around their success. Not resentment toward those who had success, resentment toward the kind of circus that built around it. There's definitely something intrusive and demanding about that kind of, not just their success, but the success of the scene, the culture, and then the expectations that you might get for on your time, and that when Kurt passed away, that was just an interference with the ability to process and grieve, and the interference comes in the form of the intrusive, nature of the media, and they have to do their story, they have to sell what they're going to sell, and then. So you praise that situation as understanding that it's something they need to do and address, at least on a journalistic level or some some way that's ethically correct. And then there's a commercial aspect of it, which is not ethically correct, where they might address these salacious components of the situations, or just to exploit the situation, whether they're aware that is what their actions are contributing to. So yeah, there's definitely some resentment and anger.
Mm. So Soundgarden splits after 1997 after the tour for Down on the Upside, and I think it's 2008 until you start to sort of regroup to start thinking about your legacy. I remember talking to you around about the time you came down for the big day out in about 2010 down to Australia, and you'd said that at some point you had realized that your records may have been out of print or merchandise may have been out of print, and the management that you had at the time was no longer. So there was a sense of, we need to do something to preserve Soundgarden's legacy. Was that the deciding factor when you actually did start to get back together at that point?
Yeah. Our management, our long-term management from our earliest manager was Susan Silver Management. She had been so incredibly instrumental and integral to the band's success, because she believed in us as a friend. And ultimately, she had married Chris eventually. They became close. But her commitment to the band was more than just commercial or professional. You see, her interest would be one of fraternal loyalty, and that was very supportive, and she's very protective of us. So that was good. But when the band broke up, then different things happen. Chris is a solo career. Susan becomes a mom. Matt goes and joins Pearl Jam. So there are a lot of things on the table just kind of sat there. Nobody's really attending to it. Our record label, A&M, all of our friends, people at the label sold. And so their distribution relationship A&M had with Polygram is now gone. I think they're ultimately bought by Universal, BMG. Everyone there's fired. So eventually all the people, A&M goes from being a record label to really a catalog label. It's not so much an active label as it is a body of work from like the Police and Soundgarden and Janet Jackson. So no label, no management, no band, just all catalog and merch, and just sitting there while the entertainment industry is growing. There's a point in time where the most popular entertainment format was the DVD, not books, not magazines, not CD. It was the DVD, and we have no DVDs out, but we have a couple of VHSs out. We have this no online presence. Now the internet is growing. People are starting, there are web pages and online stores, and this is becoming huge. We don't have that presence. We're not talking to our fans. We're not. Our merchandise T-shirt deals have elapsed. Records going out of print. There are catalog projects that I wanted to work on that I discussed, with our attorney and the band before, and after we broke up. But there's no partner to work with, without the label and management and band. So things just kind of sat around, and we eventually had to address that. It was neglected by all the parties that had been involved. And we knew it was happening because many of our friends have children, and their children are now teenagers, and they go to the store and they buy a Nirvana record or a Nirvana t-shirt, but what they really want is a Badmotorfinger poster because they like that cool design. Right. Or whatever. It's like, yeah, they love Nirvana and they love Mudhoney, but they want to get something from Soundgarden too, and they can't find it. And I have friends calling me up saying, took my daughter to the store, there are no Soundgarden t-shirts or posters in the store. And eventually those stores go away too, probably because they couldn't sell Soundgarden merch. And so the stores went out of business, right? Isn't that what happened? So, and that's what really brought it to my attention. My friends' kids getting older, and like, why can't I get any stuff from Uncle Kim? Why can't I find his t-shirts or posters? Like, yeah, why can't you? And so that same thing happens with Matt and Ben and and Hero, who has two sons, are growing up, and Hero's like, hey man, I can't find our t-shirts or posters aren't anywhere, or this record's out of print. Matt has kids and they're growing, and So yeah, it comes to our attention that, wow, we kind of dropped the ball here. The market's changing and we're not addressing it. So we decided to get together, meet, and discuss that. And next thing you know, we're working on developing an online store and re-upping some of our merch deals. And then someone comes up with this stupid idea of like getting together and jamming. That works. So it's like, oh, let's play a show. Okay, if we have to. So we play a show. I was enjoying being semi-retired, play a show. That was great. That was fun. Want to do some more shows? Yeah, that was fun. And then after, a year of playing shows and putting out a retrospective album and with a couple of new songs, and getting the merch going and the Soundgarden World website and Facebook and Instagram and all that. It's like, Matt's like, I got some songs that I demoed that would be perfect with you guys on it. Do you want to hear it? Sure. We go listen, we get together to jam, and it's like, here, check these songs out. And then next thing you know, Matt's got a guitar in his hand. He's showing me how to play it. And then he's showing Chris how to play it. And now we've learned a song. It's like, that sounds great. We should record it. Okay. There you go.
But it was received so very well, the King Animal album, and that tour as well. It was which must have been a relief on one part, but also incredibly satisfying.
What made it fun was the ability to pick up where we left off and to get along with each other. And we just loved the team we built of our people, our crew, the back line, the production people, the guys on stage who did the guitars and drums, the tour managers, the lighting people, sound people, security guys. They all loved each other. The light guys liked the stage guys. The security guys liked the manager guys. The sound guys they all liked the band. It's like, it was just the best team. It was better than in the 80s or 90s. Mm-hmm. We loved the guys who worked for us then, but everyone was just great. It was like more like a family than a team.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just made everything so fun. I mean, everyone was smart, funny, well-humored, kind, respectful to each other. And it's just a far better experience than the weird rock world stumblings, in the 90s.
Right. And that idea, I guess, of curating your legacy, which I guess was precipitated all of that happening. Now, with Chris no longer with us, does that again take on a real importance, that idea of curating that legacy?
Oh, yeah. Yes, there was a significance and a commitment when the band reunited to curating and dealing archivally with, or contemporarily with material, like merchandise material, compilations, and it was just rolling great. Everything was rolling great. I mean, it was with the record label, with merch, the online stuff, it had just been developed so well by the band and and management, the people who worked with us. And this big stick was shoved into the spokes of our bicycle, a few years ago, and subsequent actions that were very disruptive to the mechanics that we had built, of the whole operation and process, So it's definitely been a stifling, a sort of thwarting of the band's activities and being able to address the fans, with our work.
Mm. You wrote liner notes for a box set of Chris's work.
Yes.
And in those liner notes, you said that one of his virtues was courage. What did you mean by that?
Well, in the correct use of the terms risk-taking, which these terms were originally brought up by various psychologists and philosophers dealing with creativity, interpersonal relationships. And I think Rollo May wrote a book called The Courage to Create, which is, it's a psychology book, so take it with a grain of salt. But in it makes, a lot of psychologists and philosophers are exploring the idea of risk in the context of creativity and courage, and in the context of friendship and love, and being able to receive rewards by your willingness to be creative or emotionally divulgent, and share. So it's about things like sharing, divulgence. Risk takes on another meaning mistakenly in the 80s, and somehow that risk embodies a courage to do something that's out of your familiarity. And it becomes, I don't know, bicycle stunts and mountain climbing somehow, speed skiing, whatever the hell it is. And so the idea of this intellectual and emotional pursuit of bettering yourself and the relationships in your life come down to stupid stunts, like see how far you can, and that becomes the definition of risk. And I have to constantly remind people, like, no, this idea was the idea of risk and courage came about in the 60s and 70s to mean something entirely different, and not just by impressing your friends by how long you can hold your hand in a fire. And so I think Chris might have been one of those guys that would interpret risk as doing something outside of your comfort level, maybe holding your hand in a fire. I don't know, but in practice, he might have conceptually understood risk as something, doing something that you're not letting fear hold you back, adventure. But that might have been the way he, as I know him, would understand it conceptually. But in practice, he was addressing risk in what I thought was the correct philosophical and psychological context, which was to be courageous in creativity, at least, and to some degree in his relationships with friends and significant others in his life. And he did do that, but most importantly, in his creativity.
Right. We all know, I guess, the Chris Cornell that we see on stage. He was your friend. What kind of man was he? Who was the Chris Cornell that you knew?
Well, there's a component of him that's definitely insular, even though so much of his activities are external and addressing an audience. He was insular and private. Certainly had his anxieties, like many of us do, but he wouldn't wear them on his sleeves. He would be poker faced about the kind of things that might be disruptive for him emotionally or whatever. For the most part, we're also rock guys, so we can smash our guitars if we need to. So I think he had a very strong internal environment. I think he had a great work ethic. So he wouldn't give up. So it's particularly in his creativeness. If he was, and he wasn't foolish about it, he wouldn't like bang his head against the wall repeatedly. But if there was something, if there were ideas that were good and something that generated interest with him or with his partners creatively, like if he was having difficulty with writing or creating, but Ben or Matt or I, for instance, in that situation, or somebody helping him with his solo record, if they saw some merit in something he was doing, he would respect that if it came from his partners, and he would attend to it and try to solve that problem. How can we make this song work? How can we make these lyrics work? How can we make this music work? Or how do we try something new, and how do we avoid being just conventional and patronizing that market? Mm. So he would do that. And I know it's tougher for singers, because singers, it's very easy for them to do what gets the applause and what might seem conventional. It's you're more likely to get people outside the box who are instrumentalists than they are frontmen. It's hard to, it's a bigger risk to take. And but they're certainly there. There certainly are singers and frontmen who are that way. But I think he had an understanding of that, and he regarded that certainly something he had learned from the community of friends and musicians he had grown with.
Sure. Down on the upside, hasn't had the reissue treatment perhaps that Badmotorfinger and Super Unknown have had. Is that on the cards?
Yeah, it came out in 1996, so 2001 would be its 25th anniversary.
2021.
Whoops. 2021, right? Is that where we're at?
Yes.
Would this be the 25th anniversary? Is my arithmetic correct?
It is correct. So does that...
Whoops.
It may be possibly my poor research, but I haven't seen anything about reissue. Is there something coming?
The store is closed while we're all out to lunch,
Okay. Kim, just before we finish up, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people that you would give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Certainly our social and emotional support from our significant others, friends and girlfriends and buddies who, helped us a lot, put up with a lot. There are certainly bands that aren't around anymore that were supportive and integral to helping us get gigs and to play with us and spread the word and helped us out. And, we would do something similar in that case. There are people at the record company, and if I start listing people, I will forget people.
Sure, that's okay.
And I don't want to leave people out. But definitely there were so many. Jonathan Poneman at Sub Pop was just an early believer and supporter of us before Sub Pop formed. Or the guys in that early community. That's both the guys in bands like Green River, Mudhoney, Melvin's, Malfunction, Skinyard. Jack and Dino, who produced a lot of our early work, was so important. Charles Peterson, the guys that came up with the graphic identity, which is a form of brand that you'd see on T-shirts and records. Jeff Ament, you came up with a graphic style. It was Jeff from Pearl Jam when he was with Green River, came up with these cool ideas for T-shirts and records, the Green River records that we certainly tipped our hat at and borrowed from, and so did Nirvana and a lot of other bands. Charles Peterson's live photography, his style, where you have these little trails of motion. That some of the more famous photos of Nirvana come from that, as well as Soundgarden, Green River, Tad. A lot of bands that were really great that should have had success, on a par with some of the bigger Seattle bands. And lawyers and accountants. When I go down the list of the impediments to our career.
Kim, sorry, if you have another minute, there was one thing I had meant to ask you earlier in terms of the degree in philosophy that you did. Did that give you, again, a unique perspective on fame or tools to deal with fame and just a perspective that fame is an illusion?
I think so. Yeah, I think probably. I mean, I certainly took a few ethics classes, read some philosophers in the context of ethics issues. And aesthetics. So I did remember taking a philosophy of art class and learning a lot from it. And also there's stuff I wish I'd learned that I didn't from. So there's, in general, yes. I think in general, it's teaching critical thinking and ways to contextualize things. It facilitates that kind of courageous risk that we were talking about earlier that Chris demonstrated. Having intellectual understandings, for me, certainly facilitated that kind of creative risk in giving it context and knowing how to get to that point to address something. It helped me certainly with organizing ideas, but also liberating them.
Fantastic. Kim, thank you so much for all your time. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Rod.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Kim for his time, and thank you for listening. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to Jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.